Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to a new episode of our Letter to Vox podcast.
Today, we are strapping on our hobnail boots and heading deep into the Roman world, specifically to the forests and plains of ancient Gaul. Our subject is one of the most remarkable and, frankly, controversial military narratives ever written.
That's right. Our mission today is a deep dive into the campaign reports of Gaius Julius Caesar. We're talking about the Commentari de Bello Gallico, the commentaries on the Gallic War.
And we're not just looking at the battles fought between, 58 and 50 BCE.
No, not at all. We are analyzing a document that's doing a few things at once. It's a strategic blueprint, it's an engineering manual, and maybe most importantly, it's a masterwork of political spin.
It absolutely is. This source material is just so crucial because it gives us a direct line into the mind of a political operator who absolutely needed, military success to survive politically back in Rome.
So you really got to understand from the get-go that this text has two jobs.
At least two, yes. One is to be a historical record. The other is to be pure political propaganda, designed to justify his pretty extreme actions and burnish his reputation.
Let's quickly talk about the author himself, Gaius Julius Caesar. So when this whole thing kicks off, who is he?
Well, he's a high-ranking Roman official. He's serving as proconsul, which is basically a massive provincial governor with supreme military command over a huge chunk of territory.
We're talking Cisalpine Gaul, Illyricum, and the bit of Gaul that's already Roman, Transalpine Gaul, all the areas right on the border of, well, unconquered Gaul.
And that title, proconsul, is key. It meant he was immune from prosecution while he held command.
So he was safe, legally.
For a time. He had the authority to wage war, to govern his territories, but his power was temporary. It was all tied to his performance.
And this political context, as you said, is just. It's everything. While he's out there fighting on the frontier, far from the capital, his political rivals are constantly working to undermine him.
Oh, yeah. The conservatives, the optimates, they can't stand him. And even his so-called allies, Pompeius and Crassus, who formed the triumvirate with him. It's a very fragile alliance. They're all wrestling for power back in Rome.
So being so far away is a huge liability for him.
A massive one, which is why he absolutely had to achieve spectacular military fame and glory, Roman air on the battlefield. Without these constant, dazzling victory reports streaming back to Rome, his influence would just evaporate.
His opponents would pounce.
They'd dismantle his career in a heartbeat. So the Gallic War, from the very beginning, was fundamentally a political project. It was waged with military force, sure, but it was designed to make him untouchable.
It was a war for his own survival, which explains why the whole narrative, the whole book, is so carefully crafted. He always makes it look like he's acting defensively out of necessity.
Exactly. Even when he's clearly the one on the attack. Caesar never wants to look like a conqueror. He wants to look like the savior of Rome, reacting to these terrible existential threats.
Okay, so let's look at how he sets that stage in Book 1. He starts with geography.
He does. He divides all of Gallia into three distinct parts. You've got the Belgae, the Aquitani, and the Celts, who he just calls the Gauls, or Gallier.
And right away, he starts framing this politically. He says they have different languages, different laws.
But then he immediately sets up this hierarchy of, toughness. He declares that the Belgae are the bravest of them all.
So why the Belgae?
Well, according to Caesar, it's because they were the furthest away from the civilization and refinement of the Roman province.
They weren't softened up by nice things.
Pretty much. He says they were least exposed to merchants who brought, and this is a great phrase, the softening of hearts, luxury, comfort, all that stuff. And crucially, they were right next to the Germani across the Rhine, who were constantly at war.
So they had to be tough just to survive.
They lived in a state of perpetual danger. And that makes them harder targets, and therefore much greater trophies for a Roman general to conquer.
It's so calculated. If the Belgic are the bravest people in Gaul, then conquering them makes Caesar's achievement that much bigger in the eyes of everyone back home.
It's classic propaganda. He's setting the dramatic scale before the story even really starts.
Which brings us right to the first crisis, the catalyst for the whole Roman intervention in 58 BCE. The Helvetii tribe.
Right. The narrative kicks off with this guy, Orgetorix. He's described as the noblest and richest of the Helvetii, and he's completely consumed by this obsession with power.
And he cooks up a plan.
A huge plan. He starts a conspiracy to move the entire population, we're told hundreds of thousands of people, out of their mountain homes to go and seize control of all of Gaul.
And Caesar frames this massive migration as an immediate threat to Rome.
Of course he does. And the logistics of it really highlight his quick thinking. The Helvetii had two ways to go. One was this narrow, difficult path through Sequani territory. The other was much easier.
Right through the Roman province, past Geneva.
Exactly. So Caesar, who we're told rushes from Rome in these forced marches, gets to Geneva and immediately orders the bridge torn down.
A clear physical signal. No entry.
A physical and a political one, yeah. It showed he was serious. It denied them the easy path. But then he does something even more incredible while the Helvetes are trying to negotiate.
This is the famous defensive wall.
It's unbelievable. While he's stalling their envoys, claiming he needs time to think, his army builds this massive defensive rampart and ditch. It runs for about 18 miles.
18 miles.
18 miles long, 16 feet high, stretching all the way from Lake Geneva to the Jura Mountains.
And he did this in just a few weeks. The sheer scale of that. It's a message in itself. It's a statement of Roman will and Roman engineering.
It's an unmistakable message of absolute resolve, and it forces the Helvetii to take that difficult detour. But even then, once they're moving away from Roman land, Caesar decides to intervene.
So what's his justification this time? They aren't a threat to the province anymore.
His justification is all about strategic necessity, self-defense. He argues that if this warlike Helvetii tribe settles in the rich, open land near the province, it would be a great danger because of their hostile nature.
He's basically saying he can't tolerate a huge, hostile military population settling right on his border.
Exactly. And that's when we see his decisive military side. He catches a quarter of the Helvetii army before they've crossed the Aire River, the Senone, and just destroys them. Total surprise.
And then we get those casualty numbers. After the final big battle, he claims that out of an alleged 368,000 people who started the journey, only 110,000 were left.
And we have to talk about those numbers. They are the purest form of propaganda in the entire book.
I mean, they're wildly inflated, right?
Historians all agree on that. They're enormous, so why include them? Because if you inflate the size of the threat, 368,000 people, and you inflate the scale of the destruction, you magnify your own glory back in Rome.
He can claim he averted a catastrophe.
A catastrophe bigger than anyone even imagined. But it's the aftermath that really shows his strategic mind. He forces the survivors to go back to their burnt-down villages. This wasn't mercy.
No, it was cold, calculated geopolitics.
Absolutely. If that land became empty, a power vacuum would be created. And Caesar was terrified that volatile German tribes would just pour across the Rhine to fill it.
So by forcing the Helvetii survivors back, he maintains a buffer state. And he secures his border against a much bigger threat.
All under the guise of restoring order. So having dealt with this internal Gallic threat, the focus of Book One then pivots to something far more serious.
The external threat. The Germans across the Rhine, led by this figure, Ariovistus.
This was a brilliant political move. Caesar needed a new enemy to justify staying in Gaul with his army. And conveniently, the Hardui, who are supposed allies of Rome, appeal to him for help against Ariovistus.
And Ariovistus is this powerful German leader who's already settled a lot of his people, the Suebi, in Gaul.
Caesar sees his chance. His stated reason for acting is that if more and more Germanic hordes cross the Rhine, they'll become unstoppable. So he moves with his usual speed and seizes Assomption modern Besançon.
A key strategic city, right?
Full of supplies. He grabs it before Ariovistus can. But this is where Caesar faces a genuine crisis. And it's not from the Gauls or the Germans. It's from his own men.
Mutiny of fear.
Yes. The memory of the Furor Teutonicus. The sheer terror the Cimbrian Teutones inspired a few decades earlier when they almost destroyed the Republic. It was still raw in the legions.
And the panic was real.
It was crippling. Military tribunes, a lot of them young, politically connected guys without much real battlefield experience, they're all asking for leave to go home. Rumors are spreading about how huge and ferocious these German warriors are. The whole camp is paralyzed with fear.
And Caesar's response here is probably one of the most famous examples of his leadership.
It's a masterclass. He gathers the troops, and instead of just, appealing to their courage, he shames them. He basically says anyone who wants to leave can go.
But then he delivers the masterstroke.
He does. He declares that he will go on and fight alone, with only his loyal 10th Legion, who he dramatically calls his Praetorian Guard.
It's just spectacular theater. He isolates the cowards and at the same time cements the undying loyalty of his best unit. The panic just vanishes.
The rest of the legions are shamed into following the 10th. It's a brilliant move.
Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you enjoy this podcast.
So when Caesar finally meets Ariovistus to negotiate, the German leader is incredibly confident.
He basically tells Caesar to get lost.
Pretty much. He says Gaul is his province, won by conquest, not Rome's. He warns Caesar not to meddle, and he boasts that no one has ever fought the undefeated Germania without being destroyed.
A direct challenge to Roman authority. Caesar can't let that stand.
Absolutely not. He needs a big, decisive win. And in the battle that follows, that's exactly what he gets. A complete, crushing victory. Ariovistus barely escapes back across the Rhine and is never seen again.
So in Run Campaign, in Book 1, he deals with the Helvetii and the Germans.
And in doing so, he effectively establishes the Rhine River as the new de facto border of Roman interest. It secures his rear, and it sets the stage for everything that comes next.
Which, moving into Book 2, is the campaign against the powerful northern tribes, the Belgae.
The Belgae had been watching Caesar's rapid advance, and they recognized the threat, so they form a defensive coalition.
But of course, Caesar doesn't frame it as defensive.
Never. He immediately portrays their coalition, a huge force, he claims it was 300,000 men, as an aggressive threat aimed at Rome itself. That justifies his preemptive invasion of their territory.
And right away, he gets a huge break. The Remi tribe defects.
The Remis were crucial. They were afraid of their more powerful neighbors, so they switched sides and became vital Roman allies. They fed Caesar a constant stream of intelligence on the entire Belgian coalition. Strengths, locations, plans, everything.
But the coalition's size turned out to be its biggest weakness, didn't it?
It's a recurring theme in these wars. The Gauls could gather huge numbers, but they often lacked the logistics and the long-term unity to keep such a force in the field. The Belgian army pretty much disintegrated on its own.
Which allowed Caesar to just pick them off, one by one.
He pursued them relentlessly. The Suessines, the Bellivaces, they're all forced to surrender pretty quickly, handing over huge numbers of hostages.
But there was one tribe that refused to bend. The Nervii.
The Nervii. Caesar describes them as the wildest and bravest of them all. They rejected any contact with merchants, refused to drink wine, anything they thought would make them soft. And they decided to wait for Caesar in ambush.
Which led to the Battle of the Sabus River, one of Caesar's closest calls.
Oh, it was terrifying. The Nervii launched this full-scale surprise attack from the woods while the Roman legions were still scattered and setting up camp. It was almost a catastrophic defeat.
And this is where Caesar, the hero, the warrior, is really forged in the narrative.
Yes. He writes that he grabbed a shield from a common soldier and plunged right into the front line himself, personally rallying the troops. This act of personal physical leadership was critical.
It turned the tide.
It shored up morale just long enough for his delayed legions to arrive and crush the Nervii. He turned near disaster into a massive victory, and you can be sure that story was told all over Rome.
The campaign ends with one final brutal display of power against the Adjuatusor tribe.
Right. They retreat to their fortified city, and at first they're mocking the Roman siege engines, but then they see the giant towers and rams moving towards them, and their mockery turns to fear.
They offer to surrender, but Caesar demands they hand over all their weapons.
And they don't. They try to trick him, holding back about a third of their arms for a surprise attack. When Caesar finds out, the punishment is absolute.
He storms the city and sells every single survivor, 53,000 people, into slavery.
53,000. It wasn't just a punishment. It was a message to every other tribe in Gaul. This is the price of defiance.
So after securing the north and the south, we get into books 3 and 4, which introduce completely new kinds of warfare.
We do. We see this unexpected naval war against the Veneti, a powerful coastal tribe that controlled the trade routes to Britannia.
And they were a unique challenge. Their towns were on these peninsulas that were cut off by the high tide twice a day. You couldn't besiege them in the normal way.
And their ships were built for the rough Atlantic, not the Mediterranean. They were heavy, oak-built, with high sides and thick leather sails. The standard Roman tactic of ramming them with a bronze beak, the rostra, was completely useless.
The Romans had to innovate.
They did. Caesar's fleet, led by Decimus Brutus, came up with this ingenious solution. They used long poles with sharp sides on the end to cut the ropes holding up the heavy leather sails.
You cripple their ships.
Exactly. The sails collapse, the ships are dead in the water, and the faster Roman ships can swarm them and board them. It's a brilliant piece of tactical adaptation.
Then in Book 4, we get another German crisis. The Usipeter and Tencteri tribes cross the Rhine.
And Caesar sees this as an intolerable violation of his new border. What follows is one of the most controversial and brutal episodes in the entire war.
This is the massacre.
It is. Caesar claims the Germans violated a truce during negotiations, so he arrests their envoys and launches a surprise attack on their entire camp.
And we're not talking about an army. This was an attack on the entire tribe, men, women, and children.
He claims he slaughtered 430,000 people. Again, the number is almost certainly exaggerated, but the intent was clearly extermination.
And this act caused a huge backlash in Rome.
Oh, yeah. His enemy, Cato the Younger, denounced it in the Senate as a monstrous outrage, a frevol. He even demanded that Caesar be handed over to the Germans to atone for the crime.
And Caesar's response was not to apologize.
His response was to double down with a spectacle of power, the Rhine Bridge. To prove to the Germans that they were never safe, he built a massive timber bridge across the powerful Rhine River in just 10 days.
10 days. It's an engineering feat that was meant to be a political statement.
It was pure psychological warfare. He marched his legions across, spent a couple of weeks terrorizing the area, marched back, and then dismantled the bridge. The message was clear. We can cross whenever we want, and you can do nothing to stop us.
Followed by his first quick trip to Britannia, more of a reconnaissance mission, really.
It was. But politically, it was another huge win. The first Roman to cross into Britannia. It just added to his legend back home.
But despite all the success, the mood in Gaul was souring, leading to the Great Uprising in Books 5 and 7.
The whole thing was sparked by a Roman logistical error. To get enough grain for the winter, Caesar had to spread his legions out in small camps, which made them vulnerable.
Yeah, and Ambiorix of the Eburones saw his chance. He ambushed the camp of two legates, Sabinus and Cotta.
And this disaster was all about poor leadership. Ambiorix tricked the Romans into leaving their fortified camp with a lie, saying a huge Gallic revolt was underway. Cotta wanted to stay put, but Sabinus panicked.
And marched his men right into a trap.
A total annihilation. 15 cohorts, about 9,000 men, were wiped out. It was the worst Roman defeat of the war.
Ambiorix then immediately besieges another camp, commanded by Quintus Cicero.
And Cicero holds out heroically. Meanwhile, Caesar rushes to the rescue with just 2 legions. He crushes the Gallic army and saves Cicero. But in his report, you see the spin.
He blames the whole thing on Sabinus.
Completely. It was Sabinus's carelessness. He absolves himself of any blame for spreading the legions too thin in the first place. It's all on the dead guy.
But the real danger was yet to come. The rise of Vercingetorix in 52 BCE.
Vercingetorix was different. A young, charismatic Arverni king, and he managed to do what no one else had. Unify the disparate Gallic tribes into one cohesive force against Rome.
And he was brutal in how he maintained that unity.
Highest rigor and severity, extreme punishments for any disobedience. He knew the Gallic coalition was fragile, and he held it together with fear.
His military strategy was also revolutionary. Scorched earth.
A brilliant idea. He knew Caesar's greatest strength was logistics, so he decided to deny the Romans all supplies by bringing every village, every farm, every grain store in their path.
But he made one fatal exception, the city of Avaricum.
The locals begged him to spare it. He relented, and Caesar immediately laid siege. When it fell, Caesar allowed a massacre. Almost everyone inside was killed. He intended to break their will.
But it had the opposite effect. It just hardened Gallic resolve and cemented their loyalty to Vercingetorix.
Which leads to the direct confrontation between the two commanders, and to Caesar's first major, undeniable defeat.
The Siege of Gergovia, Vercingetorix's home turf.
A fortress on a mountain. Vercingetorix fought a brilliant defensive campaign, and crucially, he managed to convince Rome's key ally, the Haedui, to switch sides.
A huge blow to Caesar's logistics and prestige.
It was a disaster. Caesar tried a complex surprise attack, it failed, and he was forced to abandon the siege. He lost. It was a bitter, costly defeat, and it proved to all of Gaul that Vercingetorix could beat him.
The momentum was entirely with the Gauls. But then Vercingetorix made a mistake.
He did. After cavalry defeat, he retreated with 80,000 men into the hill fort of Alesia. He allowed himself to be trapped.
And this sets up the final, climactic showdown of the war, the Siege of Alesia.
It is arguably the most complex military operation of the ancient world. Caesar knew he wasn't just besieging the 80,000 men inside Alesia. He also had to fight off the massive Gallic relief army that Vercingetorix had summoned.
So he built the famous twin lines of fortification.
Incredible. An inner ring, the circumvallation, facing the city to keep Vercingetorix in, and an outer ring, the contravallation, facing outwards to keep the relief army out.
So Caesar's 50,000 men were sandwiched between two massive armies.
And they built miles of trenches, towers, hidden pits with stakes. It was a death trap, a 20-mile-long fortress.
The situation inside Alesia becomes desperate.
Vercingetorix runs out of food. He makes the brutal choice to expel all the civilians from the city, hoping Caesar will let them through his lines.
And Caesar doesn't. He leaves them to starve in the no man's land between the two armies.
It's a horrific moment. The final battle, when the relief army arrives, is an all-out assault on both Roman lines at once. The Roman position nearly breaks.
But Caesar's personal intervention saves the day again.
Labienus, his lieutenant, is plugging gaps, but it's Caesar leading a last-minute cavalry charge around the back of the Gallic army that breaks their spirit. The relief army is routed.
And for Vercingetorix, it's over.
He rides out in his finest armor and surrenders personally to Caesar. That was the end of unified Gallic resistance.
But not the end of the war. Book 8 details the final mop-up.
It does. Even after Alesia, there were pockets of resistance. The final stand was at a place called Uxellodunum.
And there, Caesar wanted to make one final terrifying example.
He cut off the town's water supply to force a surrender. And then, as a warning example, he granted the defenders their lives, but ordered the right hand of every surviving soldier to be cut off.
The hand that holds a sword.
A permanent, living reminder of the price of resisting Rome. That brutality secured the province for decades.
And with Gaul finally calcified, the narrative shifts right at the end to the political storm brewing back in Rome.
The mood had turned completely against him. His enemies in the Senate were working to strip him of his command, to force him to return as a private citizen where he could be prosecuted.
The legion controversy.
The final trap. The Senate orders both Caesar and Pompey to give up a legion for a supposed war in the East. Caesar complies, but Pompey gives up a legion that Caesar had loaned him. And those two legions are then kept in Italy.
Aimed right at Caesar.
It was a clear preparation for civil war. And that is where the book ends, on this cliffhanger, with Caesar framing himself as the one seeking a peaceful, legal solution, while his enemies are the ones illegally arming themselves.
The final piece of propaganda perfectly justifying his next move, crossing the Rubicon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He used the glory and the wealth from Gaul to make his bid for the ultimate prize, Rome itself.
So when we step back and look at these 8 years, we've seen a commander driven by this urgent political need. We've seen strategic brilliance, incredible engineering, personal courage, and just ruthless, unbelievable cruelty.
To summarize the central takeaways from the commentary,
First, you have to see that the conquest of Gaul was fundamentally driven by Caesar's personal political ambition. He needed the glory, and he used these external threats, the Germans, the Helvetians, as the perfect excuse.
second, the Gallic tribes, even when they united under an amazing leader like Vercingetorix, were ultimately just. They were overcome by superior Roman organization, logistics, engineering, and Caesar's absolutely relentless leadership.
And third, the commentary itself is this essential, even if it's heavily biased, historical record. It shows us these huge battles, but also these critical moments of Roman innovation and the political maneuvering that led straight to the end of the Republic.
And that really leaves us with a final thought. When you consider the sheer brutality, the massacres, the enslavement, the final mutilation of the defenders at Uxellodunum, you have to ask, how fundamentally did Caesar's political calculus, which put his own survival and glory above the lives of millions, permanently change the moral compass of the Roman state? Did that ruthless legacy from the Gallic Wars pave the path for the future Roman Empire?